first of all, who am I? I'm a science and rationality communicator on social media, mainly on YouTube, and I run these two channels, Science is Dope and ED Rational. If I think some people already know who I am, but in my years of going through and going through debates and arguments, I've seen how people tend to come to these logical errors often in their arguments, and something that makes me curious about this is why do we tend to do this? Like, that's what I'm gonna talk about. Why do we think in this manner that leads us to wrong conclusions? But first, I want all of you to look at this picture. Just look at these two images, and the central line in which image is longer? That's my question. So just look at the top one and the bottom one, and the central horizontal line. Where do you see a longer one? If you see the bottom one as, don't yell out the answer if you know it already. But if you see the bottom one as longer, just raise your hand. I think a majority of people see the bottom one as longer. But the fact is, they're both exactly the same length. So why do we do this? Why do we see something that's not actually true? Now, I think the people who knew the answer, I think they've seen things like this often. They're called optical illusions. I'm sure everyone is familiar with them. For example, in this left image, these are all parallel lines, but you will feel like there's a central bulge in the middle. And the top right image, the two orange circles in the center, they're the same size, but you'll see them as different sizes. And you'll also see in the bottom right image, the moon looks as if it's different size. This is an illusion you can actually see. Tonight, go out, look at the moon. When it's closer to the horizon, it'll look as if it's larger. And if it's closer to you, so this image actually makes it very clear. So the railway track is supposed to give the illusion that one of these moons is closer than the other, and that makes us think as if the one on the horizon is larger, which is not the case. They're the same size. So why do we see things as different from the way they actually are? That's the question. So who is making us do this? Who's the culprit? Right? Is it our eyes? Because we are seeing things. Or is it our brain? Because what we see, we also process. It's our brain telling us that this line is longer or this circle is bigger. So why does that happen? So who's actually causing this? Is it our eyes or is it our brain? I'll give you another question to try and answer this question. So if you know the answer, don't yell it out. So imagine, okay, I bought a bat and a ball for 110 rupees, and the bat costs 100 rupees more than the ball. How much did they each cost? Is it 100 for the bat and 10 for the ball? How many of you feel like this might be the answer? Just raise your hand. Be confident, it's okay. We all make this mistake. It's actually wrong. And the answer is 105 for the bat and 5 for the ball. Only then there's a 100 rupee difference, right? But most of us, including me when I first saw this question, have a tendency to think of this answer. this answer, 110. I'm sure those of you who didn't saw this question before, and the first time you came across this, you might have got it wrong. But I think what is clear now, so this doesn't involve our eyes, right? I mean, you could have been blind, God forbid, and you could still answer this question, right? So if you still got it wrong, it's your brain, right? It's not your eyes. So your brain, so the trick, this riddles like these, there are the other riddles, I'm sure you're familiar. But riddles and trick questions help us answer this question of who's the culprit. It's our brain. Our brains have a very flawed processing system. I want this to be like, I want you to take this in, okay? The organ that you learn about the world with, that you see and experience the world with, is fundamentally flawed. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is this. I showed you earlier that these two lines are the same length, the central horizontal line. Look at them now again and tell me, do you see them as the same length or different lengths? You still, just if you see it as different lengths, just raise your hand. Yeah. That's the thing. Most of us, in fact, all of us, we are, like, our brains are not only flawed in this processing, we are unaware of this flaw. Our brains are unaware, like, our brains are still yelling out that the bottom line is longer. But the only way that we can overcome this, like if I ask you which line is longer, all you can do is ignore this answer that your brain is telling you and go with what the facts are, which is that they're the same length. So our brains are not only flawed, they're unaware. The brains are unaware that they're flawed. That's the thing about our brain. So far, I've shown you, I made a point that the brains have a very flawed processing system. It's the same flaw of our brains that makes us end up in conclusions or wrong ideas, because of, we might think we're making a logically correct conclusion, but the fact is we're not. And we won't realize that. That's the thing. I'll give you some real life examples. So everything I've talked about are specific problems. I'll get into some real life situations that you see often where this flaw of our brains gets highlighted. So I'll give you an example. Imagine that you're going through a major medical condition, some serious something that the doctors can't help you with. Like the doctors have given you 6 months to live. But your friend comes to you and tells you that, hey, I had this cancer and the doctors told me I wouldn't live. But I went to this one place and they gave me this medicine and I had it and now I'm okay. And you're tempted to believe this person, right? Because you're also desperate for some sort of cure, and so you decide to listen to this person. And he shows you that he went here, some alternative medical center, some homeopathic Ayurveda something center. And they're the ones who give them the medicine. If you take the word of this one person and go to this place and and hope for a cure, you're actually falling into one of these logical traps, one of these flaws of your brain. Does anyone know the name of this fallacy? You're listening to anecdotal evidence, right? You're listening to one person's experience and making a decision based on that. Now, I'm not saying that there is absolutely no way that they can cure you. Of course, if they have if they have a statistical evidence of evidence based in studies and research where they understand the mechanism of a disease before they try to cure it or whatever, then sure, I don't mind. But when you make a decision based on one case that you heard of or that you read about, that's an anecdotal evidence fallacy. I'll give you another example of something that happened to me. When I was in school, when I was a little boy, there was a student in my class who would say that today the teacher's gonna take a surprise test. And lo and behold, when the teacher comes, surprise test time. It's like, or maybe, he might tell another friend of mine that, hey, so the teachers are giving the graded answer sheets after the exam, and he tells another friend that, hey, I think you're gonna fail today. And lo and behold, this student fails. So, anything that this one student says tends to come true. But that's actually a fallacy. Does anyone know the name of this fallacy? Wait, before I tell you that, there's a term for this in Malayalam. I'm guessing a lot of people here are Malayalis. It's called Karinak, right? Literal translation, black tongue. I know it makes no sense, but it means whenever a person has this, whatever they say tends to come true. That's what it means. But it's actually fallacy. It's a correlation not equal to causation fallacy. So, just because the person said there will be a test today is not what caused the test. It's the teacher's decision to take the test or not. Or I had another friend who used to think, hey, I thought something bad is going to happen to my parents today, and lo and behold, the parents had a car accident that day. So this friend of mine thought that him thinking this bad thought about his parents was what caused the parents to get into an accident. When thinking this thing or saying one thing and a thing happening, those two events are just correlated. They're not causally related. The student saying this is not what caused the test to happen. It's not what caused the accident to happen. That's a thing. Now I'll give you another example. So when you go for a job interview, you'll always be dressed in formals and you'll present yourself well, right? Why is that? In fact, I remember in my college, when it came for placement season, we were all advised to buy a set of formal clothes before setting for placements. Why is that? It's because, have you heard this phrase before? First impression is the best impression. We want to create, when we go for a job interview, we want to create an impression in the interviewer's mind which favors us. Let's say any further judgment they make about us, about what we say, about the answers we give, about whether we get the job or not. Creating a good first impression biases them in our favor, in favor of making a decision in our favor. Do you know what this bias is called? It's called confirmation bias. It's actually one of the most common biases we tend to fall into. So, next time you hear this sentence, just remember that this owes its existence to confirmation bias. See, ideally, think about why it's wrong, okay? Ideally, the way a person is dressed is not what qualifies him for a job, right? But the way the person presents himself is one of the most biggest deciding factors on whether he gets the job. That's a problem with confirmation bias. You don't give enough value to the actual things that matter for your decision. Give you one more example. So, if any of you have worked in corporate, I used to work in corporate, and I had this friend, this colleague. So we had our salary increments in the month of December. This friend of mine would be very diligent, very thorough in his work in the months of November and December. I'm sure everyone knows someone like that. Maybe you are like that yourself. But why is this? Why does this tend to happen? Because of a phenomenon known as recency bias. Should have probably made that font bigger, but yeah. We give more weightage to things that happened recently more than what happened in the beginning part of the year, or right, when that shouldn't be the case. Ideally, we should equally value everything that happened throughout the year. But there's a bias which makes us give more importance to what happened more recently. That is recency bias. So there are lots of biases and fallacies like this. I'm not gonna talk about all of them and waste your time. In fact, I've made a video about this. You can go check it out. Sadhguru, who's on the thumbnail, Jaggi, sorry. He is a very ideal candidate for this game of spotting fallacies and learning fallacies, because he tends to make a lot of them in any talk he gives. So, yeah, I won't tell you more about this and bore you. This is a screenshot of the game. So, you can go check it out. It's got a bunch of fallacies and cute little icons. Who's that clap from? Thank you. So yeah, check it out. But I think the question we came to answer was, why are our brains like this in the first place? Why can't we just look at a picture and tell which line is actually longer, or tell which they're actually parallel lines or circle is big or whatever? Why do we get these wrong answers? Why are our brains telling us or jumping to these wrong conclusions, which leads to a million problems in our society, religion, cults, whatever, you know examples. Why are our brains like this? Any guesses? Anyone? Why do we have that laziness? Huh? Yes, that's the answer I was looking for. It's the way we evolved. It's the way our brains evolved. We evolved into an environment where we don't have all these complex, things like conclusions from science and studies and research and medicine. All these things were not there. All we had was a simple, wild environment. So I'll give you a specific example of how a fallacy comes about. Imagine a Stone Age child who's playing near a lake, but his mom comes and tells him, "Hey, how many times have I told you not to play here? Don't go near the lake, come back, we need to go back, dad is calling," whatever. And the child listens to the mom, but unaware to him, there was a crocodile in the lake. So, did the mom protect him or not? See, what we have to look at is the child's tendency to listen. If there was a crock and the child listens, he survives. If there was no crock, but the child still listens, he'll still survive. If the child doesn't listen, in one of the cases, he dies. So, evolutionarily, survival advantage is there in the child that listens. And we are all descendants of that child. We have this tendency to trust an authority figure. When an authority figure says something, we blindly listen, we follow. And at that time, it made sense. There was an evolutionary survival advantage for that trait. But in today's world, it doesn't make sense. But unfortunately, we are still the same humans that were there in the planet tens of thousands of years back. So, I'm talking about, do you know what fallacy I'm talking about? It's an appeal to authority fallacy. All of religion, all cults, everything can be explained using this one fallacy, appeal to authority. Blindly trusting when an authority tells us X, Y, Z, whatever. So, now that we know what are the kinds of fallacies and why we have erroneous thinking in the first place, how on earth do we overcome it? Let's first talk about biases. See, biases unfortunately cannot be overcome. As humans, we have an inbuilt wiring to, let's say, for confirmation bias, for recency bias, all these biases. It's kind of like the two lines images I showed you. No matter how much you try, you cannot see them as equal lengths. You will see them as different lengths. Biases are the same way. You will decide based on what you are biased to decide. What you are more inclined to decide, and you will make those mistakes. So, what is the best thing that can be done is to be aware of our own biases. To remember that, let's say, for example, if you're conducting an interview, if you are an interviewer, not the interview, know that the interviewee coming well presentable is not what is going to influence your final decision. So when you make a final decision, remember that you are biased to make a decision simply because of the way the candidate presents himself, him or herself. So the best thing, I didn't want to touch upon anything in religion here, but any decision you make based on religion, just remember that you have a tendency to make this decision because you're biased in the first place. All we can do is be aware that we have this bias, that we do tend to make decisions, make our final choice based on what we're biased to make. So, so what you can do is be aware of it and correct for it. So, for example, in the lines example, in the two images example, you shut your brain up. You didn't listen to your brain and you went with what the actual facts are in that example, right? It's a similar thing you have to do with biases. Fallacies, on the other hand, are something that can be overcome. So when you hear a person telling you, hey, this medicine or this amazing detox diet is did wonders for my body, you know that's anecdotal evidence. You can overcome, you can, when you identify a fallacy, you can overcome the fallacy. Unlike biases, fallacies can be overcome. The ideal thing is to be able to spot fallacies in everyday life. And what you can do for that is watch my video. And that's it. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Any questions that you have? Feel free to ask. And I know I probably didn't cover every little thing. I can't think of anything I might have missed. Thank you.